In this video, I'll explore why we fail and why we will fail. The first is a lack of skill. There are a vast number of things to learn and a certain amount of time to learn them. And particularly important new and innovative things are so new that we don't know how to do them. And even once we've learned how to do them, we have to practice and get good enough at doing them in order to succeed. And so a lack of skill. Another source of tremendous amount of failure is an inaccurate map. And it's very important to understand that reality, the uninterrupted whole, the multidimensional ecology, the totality of all that is vastly beyond human thought, meaning we can't even keep up in real time with the activity of a single finger at a subatomic level. There's just so much going on. And what this creates is the need for a map of reality that is dumbed down enough to be able to support thought at the level and speed that we can generate it. And this is called language. And so we create a map, a crude map of reality, connecting dots, creating words, and we create a grid. We create a grid, and it's not perfect. And that is our experience of reality, is not reality, but the grid of perception. You see, and this grid is great for highlighting what's going on here and what's going on here and what's going on here. It's a crude map of reality. But what about all this stuff here, right? It's vaguely alluded to if we're paying attention to it. But most of it just goes way over our head. And our maps are not only crude in their density, they're crude in their multidimensionality. We have 5 physiological lenses through which to perceive reality. We have sound, we have sight, we have smell, we have touch, we have taste. And of course, they generate, right? They generate stimuli, they generate data. Each of those measuring devices creates data. But there are an infinite amount of measuring devices that could be generating data. Data that we don't know about because we don't have the observing and measuring device. Before the microscope, for example, there was all kinds of things that we didn't know about. And the same is true of an infinite number of observing and measuring devices that will be generated sometime in the next trillion years, sometime in the next trillion years. But we don't know about them, and we don't know that we don't know. And our data set is blank, right? And just as we couldn't predict death by germs, right, back 100 years ago or so, in the time of Louis Pasteur, Pasteur speculated that just maybe there were invisible bacteria that were killing babies, and that when doctors told women to come to the hospital, that they knew what they were doing, and then stopped working on their cadavers and went and delivered a baby. And when doctors killed thousands upon thousands of babies by transmitting germs from the cadaver to the infant and to the mother, the doctors didn't know that they didn't know about germs. Because the observing and measuring devices to see them, the microscope hadn't been invented yet. Well, eyes are an observing and measuring device. But what about TWIs? What is a TWI? I don't know, because it hasn't been invented. But it is extreme hubris, the hubris of those doctors that killed tens of thousands of patients. It is extreme hubris to say that because I don't know it exists, that it doesn't exist. You see, and we couldn't predict the death of those children because we didn't have a paradigm to explain them. We didn't have an ability to observe them. And so we are, in essence, flying 99.9% blind. Now, fortunately, the areas we do know about have a lot of relevance, right? So we may only see 1% of 1% of 1% of what is there to be seen, but we tend to see the stuff that's near us, so it's relevant to us in that sense, as opposed to, something we don't know that's tens of trillions of light years away. Well, we just don't know that we don't know it, right? But it's not quite as proximate. Right? So luckily, the 5 observing and measuring devices that we possess and extrapolate with relate to the very tiny portion of reality that seems to have a lot to do with us. And so we tend to be able to predict a fair amount of things in our proximity for a reasonable period of time. Right? We may not be able to predict when the next earthquake is going to come, as I stay here in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we can predict until the next major earthquake comes that I'll be able to walk on my floor without falling through in all likelihood, right? So we have a reasonable predictive ability. But the bottom line is, we see less than 1% of 1% of 1% of all there is to see. And our ability to comprehend it is much slower, much grainier than it's actually happening. And this is conducive to failure. Another reason we fail is loyalty to culture, to family, to individuals. Every pattern that exists in the world today exists because it was considered useful. Now, sometimes it is considered useful because it has a strong corollary with survival and security of survival, right? Sometimes this pattern seems to always be found around survival and security of survival. And so someone in our cult, someone in our family history, adopted the pattern because it seemed like the right thing to do. And it's been with us based on that corollary relationship, right? But sometimes they're wrong. Secondly, they're always outdated. They're always imperfect, meaning the thing that kept us alive in the past is going to kill us in the future, right? Whatever it was, right? If you go back to the 1980s and have one of those brick cell phones and plug it in, it doesn't work anymore. But even if it does work, the fact that everyone else is using a 1,000 times more efficient device called a smartphone means that you are likely to fail using an older technology relative to a new technology. Well, family patterns, cult patterns are always outdated technology. Apple pie, a largely outdated technology. A terrific technology when people were farming, when people were getting 12 hours of exercise, 6 days a week, carbohydrates and sugar were a very good technology, right? But when you're sitting behind a desk or sitting in front of a TV 9 hours a day, the exact same thing that kept us alive and nourished us starts killing us, right? Because the circumstances change, but the protocol lags behind. And so our loyalty, our fondness, our attachment to the past. Oh, I remember when we used to do that. I want to go back there where it's familiar, of the family. I want to go back there. I want to do what I did back there. I know how to do that because there's a new thing that I need to learn that I don't know, and therefore I'm not very good at it. But I'm really good at playing jacks. I'm really good at playing tag. Right? I'm really good at eating apple pie. I want to do that. Right? So we will fail. Right? It's important to understand that 99.9% of all patterns of energy are extinct. And extrapolated, will be extinct. Right? We are the 1% today. 99.9% of all the life forms in the last 10 billion years are dead. Right? Most of the species are radically changed or extinct. Most of the insects, the fish, the plants, they've all radically changed or ceased to be entirely. 95% of all cultures are dead. Their languages are dead. Their belief systems are dead. Right? So we're part of a very small percentage of what is. And a few billion years from now, certainly a trillion years from now, 99.9% of everything here today, right? The human body as it's currently configured, computers, if there's still language at that time that uses letters, all the thought paradigms of a trillion years from now, it's all dead. And it has evolved into something more intelligent. Well, there's a 99.9% failure rate over time. If you look at continuing a given pattern as success, if you look at you and say, oh, I want to be me, and I'd like to succeed and I'd like to endure, right? There's a 99.9% or 100% chance that you're going to die at some point, right? But there's a 99.9% chance that every pattern that you and your family are putting out there at the moment that seems to be getting a reasonable return on investment is dead. It won't be there in the future. So holding on to things in the past because they worked in the past leads to failure in the present over time. Another reason that we will fail to be extraordinary, that we will fail to succeed at meaningful, original goals, is the network paradox. The bigger the network, the easier it is and the more efficient it is, right? If you speak English and you speak English in a network that has 1 billion people, it's a very good technology to use, speaking English. Now, speaking English is not the best language. Right? People who speak a variety of languages will say, English doesn't do a very good job at this, it doesn't do a very good job of that. But it's a big network. And that's a network of language. But there are also networks of habits, networks of beliefs. Right? If you're a Catholic in a world filled with Catholics, you've got a good network. You've also got, a good plug-in, right? Help the needy. I'm a Catholic in need. I don't really want to help you, but okay, I'll give you a hand. Here, have something, right? So you're part of a good network. But you're part of a bad religion filled with guilt, 2,000-year-old story, less and less relevant to daily life, more and more hypocrisy. But that's an example of the tension between the quality of the technology and the size of the network. Right? Now, here's the thing. If you are the first, if you pioneer something extraordinary, meaning it's not ordinary, it's unique, you're a network of one. You see, the first person that came up with USB-C, it's a 10x improvement in technology. But the first person who had a USB-C cable, right? Those are those new cables that you can't get wrong. Remember those USB cables? You had to push it in. It was always the wrong way, and then you turn it up and jam. Okay, finally it went in, fine. Now my mouse works. Well, USB-Cs, you can't get them wrong. The trouble is, the first person to create a USB-C cable had nowhere to put it. And this is the reason you are and will fail to create something extraordinary. Because the more unique, the more beautiful, the more evolutionary your idea, your technology, your habit, the smaller your network, you've got nowhere to plug it. You may learn a new communication protocol that says, tell me your needs. But in a group that doesn't know the difference between preferences and needs, in a group that judges people for being selfish if they speak about what they need and they're supposed to help other people meet their needs. Everyone is supposed to help others meet their needs and not have their own needs met. In a protocol like that, you bring out that technology and it falls flat. There's nowhere to put it. The network is too small, right? Now, meanwhile, you've got mediocre networks. That means medium. That means average networks, right? This is the average network. And they're all doing the same stupid thing they've been doing for hundreds of years. But because everyone's doing it, right? You got the new USB cable, but the old USB cable, you have all these places to put it. And the new place, nada, right? So if you do create something extraordinary, you've got nowhere to put it. And this is often not understood. Meaning it's not enough to create in yourself a better habit, a superior technology, a superior pattern. If there's nowhere to put it, if no one has a way to receive the pattern, it's not as good. You follow me? The USB cable with USB-C that has nowhere to put it is not as good as a crappy USB-B or A cable that has millions of places to put it, right? It's like a plug. If you've got a regular 3-prong plug and you're in the US, you've got lots of places to put it. Now, it's a bit bulky. Why not create another plug that just has one pin and does a completely different technology and extrapolates the electricity? It's wonderful. It's just there's no place to put it. And so there's a tremendous inertial drag towards average, towards normalcy, because the network is so big, it's so easy, right? It's why people thought Tesla would fail, because the network was so small. There weren't any charging stations, but there were all these gas stations. So even though Teslas are the safest cars in the world, even though they're cleaner, right? Even though they're quieter, right? Even though they're lower maintenance, even though they're moving towards being cheaper, right? There weren't many charging stations, and most of those new ideas fail, right? So there is 1% of 1% that transcends that rate. But those are your odds. 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, depending on what you're attempting. Like, if you want to make a new sandwich, well, you've got all the breads being made constantly in the network. You've got all the cheeses being made constantly in the network, right? So if you want to make a new sandwich using standard ingredients, that's easy. A new sandwich, right? The cutting boards are there, the language is there, the money is there, the ingredients are there, so that's not hard. But if you want to create a new bandwidth, what's that? Well, it's a new dish that requires food that isn't grown anywhere. It's a new form of food that needs to be grown somewhere. And then it needs to be harvested in a new way that nobody's ever done before. And then tests have to be done. And then you're going to make all that, and you're going to make that. Well, you've got the pull of normalcy. It's easier to succeed with bigger networks. So the more extraordinarily brilliant, creative, wonderful, and evolutionary your idea, the smaller the network support is for that idea and the higher odds of it failing, precisely because it is so good. Meaning, if it's miles ahead of everyone else, that means it's very different than everything else. If it's very different than everything else, it has no network support. So you're going to fail, and you are failing to bring revolutionary ideas into the world because you've got a network of one, or you've got a network of 1,000 and you don't know who they are. You can't connect with them through time and space. And so your experience of reality is, I'm the only one who answers and tells the truth around this question, and it just ices me out. I'm all alone in a network of one. And as a secondary problem of networks of one is they tend to go insane. So one thing is they starve for lack of resources because there's no support without a network. That's the first problem. But the other is, even if you manage to sustain those things yourself, you have a probability of going crazy because you don't have the ability to regulate against anything. If you're playing tennis and you've got a partner who hits the ball back, you don't go crazy. But if every ball you hit goes into a black void and you never see the ball again, and the moment it leaves your racket, it disappears, and nobody ever hits it back, you cannot create a coherent game of tennis. You're not getting the feedback. You need a minimum of 2 other people, at least one other sane person, right? That's part of your network. And that first person is the hardest to find. Why? Because you have nothing to offer them except cost. Right? There's no benefit to joining a network of one. Here, why don't you switch to USB-C? Where would I put the plugs? Well, when you're over at my house, you can plug it into my computer. And that's it. I'm not going to. What if I need to charge it in my car? No. Right? So you've got nothing to offer a network of one. And you've got enormous cost. Why? Well, you're going to have to take time off work to learn something radically new, because it takes time to learn something radically new. So that's your first cost. You have to take time away from another network, work network, a social network, etc. You're going to unplug from that network, and it takes a lot of time just to grasp what you don't know that you don't know before you can understand the issue. So time is high. That's your first cost you offer anyone to join a new network. There's also money cost, because no one's going to pay you to join a new network. Well, they might. But look at how PayPal got off the ground. It was a new network. Nobody thought you could send money by email. It was another brilliant thing by Elon. Why can't we send money for free over email? Why not? Good idea, right? But how good is PayPal? If nobody's ever heard of it, you try and send them $20 and they don't have the app, and so they're not using it. So PayPal did actually pay hundreds of millions of dollars to get people to buy into the network so that the network could become big enough to be useful. How does it work? Join PayPal and you get $10, and so does your friend. Join PayPal and you get $20, and anyone you send to PayPal gets $20, and you can link it with a bank account. You can get the money out of the network. So if you don't like it, right? Well, how many hundreds of millions of dollars needed to be spent in bribes to get people to join the network before the network was valuable enough to want to join without the bribe? Right? And see, not many people have $200 million backing them or available to convert people to their network. But that's kind of what it takes to grow a network big enough to where we want to be part of that network, right? And so the hardest sell is you're going to have to take a lot of time, a lot of money to join my network that is in a crude stage of development, and then we're going to grow it, and it's going to take months or years before that network lifts off the ground, gets big enough to be worthwhile. Because once USB-C is ubiquitous, everyone wants it, right? So we go from no one wants it in a small network to everyone wants it in a big network. And the hurdle is, how do you get your first convert when it costs them time, money, and a learning curve for crappy first stage iterations of the new technology, right? So 99% of all terrific technologies will fail and are failing because they don't have a big enough network effect. And the proposition of take a lot of time, money, and effort to adopt a network of one, nobody's interested in that. And then going back to that, if you can't get your network of one, you don't get feedback. You need customers, right? Tesla's got billions of miles driven in full self-driving, sending them constant feedback so they don't go crazy, right? You can't build an algorithm without data. You can't generate data without a network, right? So in order to refine the new technology, you need to engage with the real world. Now, Tesla, why is Tesla unique? Right? Well, most boards of directors are not going to vote for something that's, you see what Elon has done is he's put more than $1 billion into cameraware, billions into software, etc., before full self-driving has emerged. In other words, he's believing in it, and he's increasing the cost of his cars by putting in an expense that no one else in the world had at the time. Well, now that, of course, Tesla is successful, Rivian and others are copying Tesla. Oh, they all want cameras. Ford wants cameras. They all want cameras, right? But that's because the model has been proven by risking billions of dollars in startup phase when most things collapse. And Tesla almost did. But that has to be in that infrastructure of extra effort so that you don't go crazy has to be invested. Or you have theories, but they don't touch reality. You have things in your mind, you dream of, oh, how good I would be in bed with this and that, but you're not there getting awkward feedback about how terrible you are at having a conversation, let alone going to bed and all that, right? And so you're living in a fantasy world without practice, without engagement. You go crazy. Your inner world diverges from the outer world without feedback, without being able to touch base and continued feedback. You need a stable bouncing board so that you can learn your angles. You need a flat wall to hit against, right? And many people are not given the flat wall to hit against. They're not given that support to practice. If you read the biography of James Dyson, founder of Dyson Electronics, and just look at the wall that he was up against in order to create a simple thing, a bagless vacuum cleaner that was much better than the status quo. Right? The amount of inertia. And so here's another reason that you are failing and will fail. Every network has an inertia. Right? It has the momentum of inertia. Now, let's look at what is composed of this. 1, laziness. 2, mindlessness. 3, skill. 4, a big network. Profit. Capitalistic things, all existing technologies are making some people money. And if you change the technology, those people lose money. So let's look at laziness. We've all got more things to think about than we have time to think about. So if you're going to propose to me that I learn how to drive a new car in a new way, fuck that. I'm not going to do that. I've got other things that are sapping all my attention. I don't have the bandwidth to learn something new. So lack of, I'm lazy. I don't want to think about it. I'm just going to do what my parents did because I know that by heart. That's inertia, the inertia of the past. Now, there's also, I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy to think about it. It would take effort, it would take risk. But even if I'm willing to do that, let's say I ride a motorcycle for the first time. Well, I have to learn how to do that. Now, the very first time I ride a motorcycle, I may crash it. I may feel scared because I don't know what I'm doing. I know how to drive a car, right? Or vice versa, right? So when you have inertia, the new technology is always something you're not very good at. So even if it's better once you're good at it, once you learn how to type, it's better than handwriting. But you've got to learn how to type. Right? And so the next thing is you've got to feel inadequate and frustrated learning something new, which you don't if you can just enjoy feeling confident doing what you've always done. So there is also usually cost. If you upgrade to a new car, you have to get rid of your old car. That's a cost. And you also have to buy the new car. You have to learn something new. Now, you're also fighting disinformation because all the people who are making money off of the existing network, they're all saying this new thing is a terrible idea. Terrible idea. Remember when SpaceX came along? And all the big companies, Boeing and Lockheed, etc., they all got together and they hired astronauts to tell everyone, this is a terrible idea. We can't trust private companies like this. No, it's a bad idea. Let's just keep using Soyuz rockets. Or we'll figure out something eventually for, $200 billion of public money, so don't, and so you try to convert, and the uninitiated who don't know are looking around them, should I do it? Should I do this? Now, the majority of people are part of the old network. If you leave the network, their network goes down in value. The new value goes up in value. The new network goes up in value. Like if you stop using Facebook and use some new, better technology, all your friends have to follow you, or you're harder to get a hold of. So what do they say? Oh, it's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Don't do it. Stay the way things were before. Stay the way things were. Do things the way we do them, which is the old way. Right? So all your friends are pressuring you. There are financial incentives. There's a whole advertising campaign. Don't try the new technology. It's terrible. So you've got to delete all of that, which might be thousands of years, might be hundreds of years, might be decades of stored energy by millions of people. You've got to overcome that, and then you've got to create the new technology and create the new momentum. And that requires a tremendous amount of time, a tremendous amount of skill, tremendous amount of money. And the technology is just starting out at that time. So it's at its worst. And there's no money coming in because nobody wants to buy in to a new crappy technology. They all want to wait until somebody else develops it, right? Because 99% of them fail. So you will not succeed at creating a radically new, transformative idea. Another reason, self-sabotage. Why? Well, instinctively, you may know all the things that I just talked about. You don't want to even get too far off the ground because you don't want to invest your whole life in something that very, very well may fail. You may die socially, financially, reputationally, etc. You can die physically, fanatically pursuing an idea without enough mass, without enough skill, without enough competency to pull it off. So we are failing. We're gonna fail 99.9% of the time to do something incredible, to change the world. Why is there only one Elon Musk changing the world in internet costs, broadband, satellite around the world, tunneling, Neuralink, brain to computers, Tesla, SpaceX, SolarCity, and counting. Why is there only one Elon? Well, he said it best when he said starting a new company, not a lawn care business. That's a very old model, just a new version of it. But starting a new company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. There's no one out there. There's a void. There's an unknown. You're barraged with messages, you're going to fail, who are you, you can't do it. It's costing tremendous amount of time, money, and natural resources. Elon put hundreds of millions of his own money and worked 100-hour weeks to reduce the odds of failing, which were always high, to reduce the odds. So you need luck. And I want to close by saying one reason why you can succeed. And it's called life and its program. Life started off some tens of billions of years ago, that big. This entire room fit into that size. This hat fit into that size. Your finger fit into less than the size of a pea. Now, it's worth noting that no one knows how to do that. Talk about magic. No one knows how to do it. There isn't a single scientist. If you tell them, I want to get everything in this body, not have the steam lift off somewhere else, I want to put everything in this body, there's one tiny little speck of the universe into the size of a pea. They can't do it. Oh, they can dehydrate you and incinerate you and crush you into a diamond. They can, right? But is it the size of a pea? Number one. Number two, where did all that steam go to? That's cheating, right? You have to get the steam, you have to get the fire, you have to get that whole apparatus into the size of a pea. We can't do it, but life can. You see, life took something the size of a pea, and it didn't just create you. It didn't just create this planet. The best estimates today, if we extrapolate, is that there are more than 2 trillion planets. Planets! Talk about peas. We're not talking about 2 trillion peas. That would be a good enough accomplishment alone. Any hedge fund would brag over that. I turned 1 pea into 2 trillion peas. Brilliant. But what about life? Life has created trillions upon trillions of stars. And amongst all those stars, there are roughly 2, maybe 3 trillion of those stars that have similar environments enough that our version of life has a reasonable chance, with enough time, of taking hold. And 1 trillion years is enough time, right? There's a lot of debate. Should we be this intelligent after only 20 or 30 billion years? Right? But, give it another trillion, and the debate will be much less controversial. Yeah, give it enough time that every random possibility is going to play out. The universe keeps getting bigger, longer, taller, wider, more complex. And every single thing that is added to the universe increases the possibility of the universe exponentially, because everything has a relationship, a relay of energy with every other thing in the entire universe. Now, life's got a tremendous track record of creating more and more intelligent things, and you're part of life. You are life. You're the 1% that made it. along with everything else alive today, you're part of the 1%. And yes, there are 99.9% odds that everything familiar to you will change so radically as to be unrecognizable in the next 100 billion years. You're at the edge. You're at the edge of life today. And the life tomorrow is going to grow out of today. And look at all the change. Look at all the miracles. All the technologies that have overcome those overwhelming odds to create fax machines and cell phones and new sneakers and jetpacks and airplanes and jet airplanes and nuclear bombs and potato chips. All these things have been invented. Right? Imagine the weird habit, right? Someone sails over from England, finds these native people in America, and they're smoking weeds. Right? They harvest this plant, they stick it in a bowl, and they don't clear the smoke out of their eyes and out of their faces. They put smoke in their mouth. Tastes foul. Takes a lot of effort to dry this, right? Who would have thought that would catch on? We found these people putting smoke in a bowl and puffing it in. Tastes foul. How about it, right? That caught on. That caught on. So there's hope, right? You can be part of the 1% or the 1% of the 1% of the 1% that breaks through all those inertias to create something extraordinary. And the purpose of this video is to help you understand it's not personal. These are the reasons that 99.9% fail. It's not personal. Secondly, you're not bad or wrong if you're failing or have tried and failed repeatedly. Thirdly, right? It's important to be humble. We may fail. We may fail. There's high odds of it. But what it also means is that we're going to need help. We're not going to need humility. We're going to need to look to life and how life has won before. We're going to have mentors. We're going to have to ask. If they won't mentor us personally, we can read their books. We're going to need to keep aware. And it's going to require more effort than it should for all those reasons. But if we're able and willing to overcome that inertia, we can join that 1% of 1% that does something extraordinary in an extraordinary way. And our gift to life will be a new pattern born through us, a new pattern that is more intelligent, that provides more sustainable well-being per unit of energy consumed than the pattern before. Thank you for watching.